Okay, so I get to this point where I've changed my mind on something that's like, I feel like my whole world has been shaken. My whole worldview is changing. And when I start viewing the world, I didn't say anything publicly about it when I first started to change my mind on this, because I wanted to be sure that I was correct, especially since I realized, well, I wasn't correct up until now. I wanted to be sure that when I changed my mind, I was educated about it and I was correct about it. So I began to do my research. And when I did, I realized that Republicans have either neglected or forgotten. I don't know whether it was willful ignorance, whether it was laziness. I don't know whether it was just naivete due to the prosperity of our country. But Republicans have forgotten that the definition of liberty is not that liberty is an end to itself. Republicans have forgotten that the real definition of liberty, how our Constitution defines liberty, is that liberty is the means to something greater. So what I do in my book, obviously the first half of this book, I name the names of the Marxists, the people and the organizations who are behind the attack on America's children, whether this is critical race theory in our schools, whether this is the transgender ideology, whether this is the effort to subvert parental rights via banning homeschooling, or these laws that we're seeing popping up in blue states around the country saying that, oh, if you don't quote unquote affirm your child's gender identity, then you can lose custody of that child. Whether it's laws that say, well, you might not want to give your kid the COVID vax, but if they're 12, they can make that decision to get it, even overruling your opposition. There's a deliberate assault on our nation, or on our nation's children, on their minds, on their spirits, on their bodies. And I wanted to get to the bottom of who's behind this. How do we stop this? And you know what I always say on the show, we have to acknowledge the reality of the political enemy that we face. Otherwise, we're not going to fight well against it. And if we don't fight well against it, we're not going to win. We're going to lose. I don't want to lose. I'm tired of losing. I know you are too. So the first half of this book, I identify the people and the organizations behind all these different assaults on our children. And then the second half of the book, I propose a solution for how we can recapture the institutions like the media and the education system, and sadly, religious institutions too, many of them at least, the law, and even the family unit. I propose what we can do practically, concretely, to recapture those institutions and then harness those institutions to protect our children from the evil that seeks to hurt them. And the second half of the book is this philosophical idea that the Republican Party is more to blame for Marxists subverting our institutions than even the Marxists are. And what I mean when I say that is we expect evil from people who have evil ideologies. We expect bad policies from Democrats. We expect Marxists to do things that would hurt us. But what we shouldn't expect and what we shouldn't accept is the Republican Party, which is supposed to be the political apparatus that serves as a bulwark against this assault on our society. We shouldn't allow the Republican Party to get away with losing these battles year after year, decade after decade. We should honestly assess, why is the Republican Party losing? What have they gotten wrong? Why are we in this cultural insanity in which we live right now, where a child in California was suspended from school for 5 days for quote unquote misgendering a classmate? How did we get to this point? And I argue in my book that the answer to that is the Republican Party and the Republican Party's failure, which may be hard for some people to read. And I say it without particular animosity towards Republicans, because as I just explained, my mind has changed a great deal on the philosophy of freedom. And so when I see the Republican Party embracing the philosophy that I formerly embraced, this idea that government's only role is to protect people's individual rights from being violated, I don't feel animosity towards these people. I fell prey to that idea myself, but I do think that the people who are leading the Republican Party, there's no excuse anymore for them not to recognize that embracing this libertarian mindset is incredibly destructive to our nation, incredibly destructive. And what I mean by that is right now we're in a situation where the Republican Party is kind of jokingly branded as the party of no. We know that we don't like what the Democrats are doing. We know that we always hate their legislation. We know that critical race theory is wrong and bad and evil. We say no to the transgender ideology. We don't want revisionist history in schools. We don't want DEI in our boardrooms. We don't want woke corporations governed by ESG. We're very, very good at pointing to things and saying that is bad, that is wrong, that is evil. We don't want it. But what we're not good at as a Republican Party is offering an alternative. And what I mean by that is we are not good at defining what is right. So we might say no to what is wrong, but we fail to offer something in exchange for the wrong thing. We fail to offer what is good and true and beautiful. And I say in my book, and I know some people are going to push back on this, I don't believe in neutrality. I don't think that we can have institutions in our country that are simply a neutral playing field. Our institutions and the very fabric of our society are going to be governed either by the beliefs and the ideologies of the Democrats or by the values and the principles of the Republicans. And when Republicans pull back because they're afraid of inserting morality into legislation, they're afraid of being accused of violating the separation of church and state, this doesn't create a neutral playing field. The Democrats just swoop in and capture whatever institutions the Republicans have pulled back from, and therefore the Democrats' version of quote-unquote morality prevails. That example that I just gave about the child in California, the student who was suspended for 5 days, is a perfect example. The Democrats don't want a neutral playing field. They want their version of morality, which you and I would define as immorality. They want their beliefs, their ideologies, their religion forced on us. Because they're not just going around saying, well, I'm going to call someone they, them, or zer. I'm going to indulge someone's transgender pronouns. No. They want to force you to do it or punish you if you don't comply. So if we don't, we can look at that and say that it's wrong, but we're never going to eradicate that from our society unless we as Republicans have something concrete to offer, and we use this concrete political agenda that we can define. We use that as the values. We use that to inform the values that we then teach to children through these institutions. Because remember, indoctrination is not a bad thing. We think it's wrong when we see indoctrination in our children's schools because of what is being indoctrinated. But indoctrination itself is a morally neutral concept. It's not good or bad. It's what is being indoctrinated that determines whether it is a good thing or a bad thing. For example, the American public school system was actually created to indoctrinate children. That's what its purpose was. It's not that now it's turned into an indoctrination center, whereas years ago it just taught reading, writing, and arithmetic. No. Public education didn't even become mandatory in our country until 1852. Massachusetts was the first state to make public education compulsory. And the reason that they did that is because at the time there were Catholic immigrants, this influx of Catholic immigrants coming to the United States, and the Protestant politicians in charge of Massachusetts wanted these children to be indoctrinated in American values so that their loyalty would be to their new country versus the country where they were born. And they wanted these Catholic children indoctrinated in Protestant values because Catholics and Protestants are always at war. Our education system was intended to indoctrinate children, but it was intended to indoctrinate them with generally good things, with Christian morals, with American values. But at some point, Republicans forgot this.